Ridge was already inside, lying back on one of the leather seats, his jaw set stubbornly, resembling their father at his most obstinate. He was recovering from a disagreement with Nick, who stood at the far side of the cabin, arms crossed, the muscles in his forearms rippling every time he adjusted his weight. For hours the conversation, if it could be called that, had revolved around the same topics: contracts, decisions, familial obligations, and a betrayal no one dared to admit straight. The air between them was heavy and tangible, carrying the sharpness of whispered truths. Eric climbed the stairs slowly, not because he was tired, but because he was listening, to the hush beneath the buzz of the jet, to the distant echo of tires hissing on wet pavement across the runway, to his own heartbeat ticking like a metronome. He stood at the doorway, looking from Ridge to Nick and interpreting the tension like sheet music. The two men glanced up at him, neither willing to break the standoff first, and for a heartbeat time seemed to stand still. Ridge then averted his gaze, feigning to check the fastening on his seatbelt, and Nick exhaled through his nostrils, almost scoffing but not quite. The flight attendant smiled politely but perfunctorily, the type you give when you're caught in the middle of a family tempest you can't control. Eric took his seat opposite Ridge, the buttery leather moaning with his weight. Nick stayed standing, bracing himself against the overhead compartment while the jet taxied. The cabin lights lowered somewhat, and through the oval windows, the runway light stretched ahead like a sparkling necklace thrown into the darkness. For a few precious minutes, there was nothing but the sound of the engines rising to a deeper, more frantic pitch. The force of acceleration pushed them back into their seats, and the ground gave way. The city became a swirl of lights, fading and disappearing behind a veil of darkening night. Eric watched the horizon tilt, then level as the plane settled. The flight attendant went silently, offering refreshments that no one accepted. Ridge eventually broke the stillness. "We shouldn't be doing this tonight," he remarked simply, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the glass. "Not after everything that's been said." Nick's eyes was as keen as glass. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you believe I had a choice?" His voice had an edge, but there was something deeper underlying it. Regret, perhaps, or an exhaustion too profound to conceal. Eric raised his hand, palm out, but they were already in motion, words clashing like the first drops of rain before a storm. The argument unfolded in jagged bursts, with each sentence acting as a flame in the darkness, highlighting prior wounds they pretended to mend. Accusations regarding decisions made behind closed doors. Questions regarding allegiance. Hints to betrayals involving people neither wished to name but knew all too well. Eric listened and intervened when the voices became too loud, but he could sense the fight's rhythm: escalation, pause, and escalation again. The air in the cabin felt warmer now, closer to the skin. Turbulence caught them somewhere over the ocean. It started as a slight vibration, enough to make the ice in the drink tray clink quietly. Then came a second, harsher jolt, and the fastened seatbelt light flashed on. The flight attendant's voice was calm and prepared, as if to assure them that everything was totally normal. Ridge looked at Eric, then Nick, but no one said anything. The argument came to a halt, trapped in that awkward silence that occurs when the elements remind you how small you are. The jet shuddered again, this time with greater intensity, causing Eric to press against the armrest. He found himself thinking ridiculously childishly that perhaps they should turn back. But they were already far from shore, with city lights replaced by an infinite black sweep of sky and sea. The engines remained steady, but the way the cabin appeared to tilt scared him. Nick eventually sat down and buckled his belt with a snap. His eyes were on the floor, and his mind was definitely elsewhere. Ridge shifted in his seat, leaning forward slightly, as if bracing himself for another round of fighting. But Eric didn't want it anymore. "This can't be the way we leave things," he replied quietly. Ridge opened his mouth to answer, but the plane jerked sharply to the left, pushing them all against the straps. The engine hum altered, hardly discernible at first, a tiny shift in pitch similar to a sour chord. The flight attendant reappeared, her appearance calm but her movements somewhat quicker. She spoke into a small intercom by the galley, but her voice was too low to be heard. Outside the windows the night appeared deeper, almost real, with a wall of darkness pressing against the glass. Eric's hand squeezed against the armrest. He understood enough about flying to see that something had changed. Nick looked up abruptly as the captain's voice came over the speakers. It was steady and reassuring, yet it was laced with something that no amount of training could fully conceal. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having some mechanical troubles. We're working to get them resolved and we'll keep you updated. For the time being, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. The line clicked off, and the stillness that followed seemed to be louder than the statement. Ridge's eyes met Eric's, a spark of something passing between them, worry undoubtedly, but also the unsaid recognition that if this was going to be awful, they were running out of time to say the important things. Nick's jaw clenched and he appeared to be about to say something, but another sharp plunge in altitude took their breath away. The cabin lights flickered once, then remained steady. Eric reflected on all the incomplete discussions, postponed dinners, and apologies he had drafted but never said. He remembered the family waiting at home, and how the house had always seemed too huge when it was quiet. He looked at Ridge and Nick and knew they were thinking about their own personal list of last things. The plane shuddered again, stronger this time, and the engine's roar grew ragged and uneven. The flight attendant's calm facade cracked briefly as she braced herself against a seat back. She looked toward the cockpit door and then aside, as if scared of what she may see. Eric felt the difference in air pressure, the small pop in his ears, and the way the cabin seemed to close in. Ridge reached over and grabbed his father's forearm, an unusual gesture that required no words. Nick sat up taller, his eyes leaping to the windows, looking for any sign of land or light, but there was only darkness. Lightning flashed in the distance, briefly and silently illuminating the clouds with a ghostly glow before sinking them back into darkness. The plane dropped, then recovered before dipping again. The captain's voice returned, still calm but with the clipped accuracy of someone juggling too many responsibilities at once. We are prepared for an emergency landing. Please follow the crew's directions. Emergency landing. In the middle of the wide ocean. Eric's mind attempted to make sense of the statement, but it felt off like a puzzle piece from another box. Ridge leaned back, softly breathing through his nose while his hand remained on Eric's arm. Nick muttered something under his breath that was too low to hear, but the bitterness in his tone was gone. In its stead was something softer, almost respectful, as if he had suddenly recalled what was truly essential. The cabin experienced another round of turbulence, this time so strong that the drinks in the galley collapsed and shattered on the carpet. The aroma of something pungent, possibly petrol, drifted faintly through the recycled air. The flight attendant moved fast, collecting loose objects, her voice firmer as she repeated safety instructions. Eric could barely hear her. He was studying Ridge and Nick, remembering the lines on their faces and the way the light caught in their eyes. He wondered if others were doing the same. The noise outside became louder, with a roar layered over the sound of the engines, and Eric knew it was the wind. The jet shifted quickly to one side, and his stomach rose. Lightning struck again, closer this time, and thunderclaps almost immediately, a loud resonant boom that seemed to reverberate through the fuselage. Someone behind them gasped and then began praying gently. Eric reached across the small aisle and placed his other hand over Ridge's. Nick's eyes went to them, and he appeared to struggle for a time before reaching out to join them, completing the circle. No one talked, but in that stillness there was more than just dispute and history. There was the raw truth about who they were to one another. The captain's voice appeared one last time, clear and final. Brace for impact. The words lingered heavily as the lights flickered again. The cabin leaned forward, and the engines produced a strained whine. Outside, darkness came up to meet them. In the seconds before the first jolt, Eric thought not of terror, but of all the mornings when he imagined there would be more time. Liam, this is Steffy, she continued, her tone sharp and urgent. You need to travel to Europe. Now. Kelly has been in a vehicle accident. The words hit him like a fist, taking his breath away. Kelly, his 7-year-old daughter, was in Europe with Steffy on a Forrester business trip. She had her mother's stubborn streak and her father's tendency to overthink. Liam's thoughts raced, memories of Kelly's gap-toothed smile conflicting with the unexpected, terrifying possibility of her injury. What happened? Is she okay? He managed, his voice cracking. Steffy answered, she's alive. But the strain in her voice suggested there was more. This is serious, Liam. She is in the hospital. I'm here with her, but you must come. I have a jet ready for you at LAX. It leaves in 2 hours. Liam was already standing, collecting his jacket and keys, his mind racing. Where are you? Which hospital? Steffi, tell me everything. Zurich, she replied. She is at Universitätsspital. I'll explain more when you arrive. Liam stood transfixed for a single second, feeling the weight of her words as the call ended. Then he rushed like a man possessed, stuffing papers into his suitcase, and called his assistant to cancel meetings, his head a swirl of panic and logistics. Kelly, his little girl. He couldn't lose her. Not now. Not ever. The transatlantic flight was an agony of waiting. The private jet Steffi had ordered was sleek and silent, but it couldn't escape Liam's mind. He sat alone in the cabin, staring out at the limitless expanse of clouds, repeating Steffi's words and looking for hints in her tone. Serious. Hospital. Zurich. He tried to concentrate on the facts, but his imagination failed him. Twisted metal, screeching tires, Kelly's petite body in a sterile hospital bed. He held the armrests and forced himself to breathe. He'd been through crises before. Corporate struggles, familial betrayals, and even Steffi's near-death experiences, but nothing had ever felt this intense. This was his daughter. He remembered Kelly's most recent video conversation, which had occurred only a week prior. She had been in Paris at the time, and her face lit up as she described the Eiffel Tower, swinging her tiny hands to simulate its design. Daddy, it's really tall. Like, taller than everything. She murmured, her eyes wide with surprise. Steffi had been in the background, laughing quietly, her face as gentle as it had ever been in a boardroom. That recollection felt like a lifeline now, something to cling to until he could see Kelly for himself. The jet landed in Zurich just as dawn broke, turning the Alps pink and gold. Liam hardly noticed. A vehicle was waiting, and within minutes he was rushing for the hospital, leaving the city's tidy streets in a blur. His phone buzzed with Steffi texts, updates, directions, and the terse she's stable but still unconscious. Each message was a knife piercing harder. He wanted to contact her and demand more, but he knew Steffi was keeping it together for Kelly. He had to do the same. Universitätsspital Zurich was a huge complex made entirely of glass and steel, with almost chilly efficiency. Liam hurried through the door, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor, and discovered Steffi in the ICU waiting area. She appeared fatigued, her dark hair tangled and her eyes red-rimmed but sharp. She stood up when she saw him, and for a while they just stared at each other, the weight of their common fear bridging the gap of years and decisions. She's in there, Steffi remarked, pointing to a set of double doors. They are doing tests. Concussion, broken arm, and some internal bruises. They're concerned about her head, Liam. She hasn't woke up yet. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. What happened? Steffi tightened her teeth and turned away, her hands fidgeting. We were driving back from a meeting in Lucerne. The truck swerved into our lane. The driver attempted to avoid it, but... She shook her head, her voice shaking. It occurred so quickly. Kelly was strapped in the back seat, but the impact... Liam instinctively stretched out, placing his hand on Kelly's arm. It's not your fault, he murmured, unsure whether he was reassuring her or himself. You couldn't have known. Steffi backed backward, her eyes flaming. I should have been more careful. I should have... Stop, he shouted firmly. We are here now. For Kelly. She nodded, wiping her tears, and escorted him to the ICU. Liam watched his daughter through a glass pane, little and vulnerable in a hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and monitors. Her blonde hair was tangled, her face pallid, and she wore a cast on the right arm. He pressed his hand to the glass, his knees weak. Can we go inside? He whispered. Not yet, Steffi replied, her voice barely audible. They are stabilizing her. The doctor said we'd see her shortly. They sat quietly, the hospital's hum filling the gap between them. Liam's mind raced with questions. What if she doesn't wake up? What if there is brain damage? What if? But he could not express them. Steffi, too, appeared engrossed in her own thoughts, her fingers twisting a bracelet Kelly had created for her last summer, a haphazard string of beads spelling mommy. Hours passed, punctuated by the steady drip of hospital time. Doctors came and went, leaving cautiously positive updates. Kelly's vital signs were steady, and brain scans revealed swelling but no catastrophic damage. The concussion was severe, they acknowledged, but she was young and resilient. She hadn't woken up yet, and every minute that passed felt like a lifetime. Liam and Steffy took turns walking, buying coffee, and checking their phones for developments from their families in Los Angeles. Liam's wife, Hope, had texted him offering to fly out, but he had told her to stay with their daughter, Beth. One catastrophe at a time, he reflected bitterly. Steffy's brother, Thomas, called, his voice filled with concern, vowing to handle everything at Forrester Creations so Steffy could focus on Kelly. Ridge, Steffy's father, also sent a note, this time in a more concerned tone. Finally, the doctor, a pleasant-looking woman with a little German accent, called them in. She's responding to stimuli, she explained. You can see her now, but keep it calm. Liam's heart hammered as they approached the room. Kelly appeared much smaller up close, her chest rising and falling to the rhythm of the machines. He touched her hand, mindful of the four, and muttered, Hey kiddo. It's Daddy. I'm here. Steffy stood on the other side, touching Kelly's hair and moving her lips in silent prayer. They sat like that for hours, talking to her and recounting stories about her favorite things. Her dog, her art projects, the time they went camping and she insisted on sleeping under the stars. Liam's voice cracked as he remembered her first day of school, when she marched in with her huge rucksack, fearless. Steffy spoke forward, her voice calmer now, detailing Kelly's obsession with making clothes and the little sketches that littered the Forrester office. The first sign appeared late that night. Kelly twitched her fingers in Liam's hand. He froze, frightened to Hope, but Steffy noticed it too. Kelly. She spoke gently. Can you hear us, sweetie? Her eyelids twitched before opening, blurry and bewildered. Mommy? She mumbled, her voice hoarse. Daddy? Liam's vision blurred with tears as he grabbed her hand. We are right here, baby. You're fine. Steffy sobbed, her hand covering her mouth. The doctor was summoned, and after a series of tests, she confirmed Kelly was waking up, her reactions lethargic but promising. She's not out of the woods, the doctor said. But this is a good sign. Over the next several days, Kelly gradually improved. She remained in the hospital, her arm in a cast, her head throbbing, but she was awake, speaking and even laughing. Liam and Steffy took turns at her bedside, their old rhythm returning after years apart. They did not discuss their history, faults, or the what-ifs that had defined their relationship. They concentrated on Kelly's recuperation, humor, and modest successes. One afternoon while Kelly rested, Liam and Steffy sat in the hospital cafeteria, the coffee becoming cold between them. She's tough, Liam replied, his tone low. Like her mom. Steffy smiled. And stubborn like her father. They exchanged a look, a nonverbal expression of understanding. Whatever their background or future, they were united in this. They loved Kelly and wanted to keep her safe. Liam reached across the table, touching her hand. We'll get through this, he stated. She nodded. Yeah, we will. Kelly's rehabilitation took weeks, but she was released with a long list of follow-up appointments and a bright pink cast that she insisted on embellishing with glitter. Liam and Steffy stayed in Zurich until she was cleared to fly, then returned her to Los Angeles, where their families awaited, ready to smother her with affection. The accident left Kelly with physical wounds and Liam and Steffy with mental ones, but it also reminded them of what was most important. As Liam pulled Kelly into bed on her first night home, clutching her stuffed unicorn tightly, he kissed her forehead and whispered, You scared us, kiddo. Don't do that again. She giggled, tired yet thrilled. Promise, Daddy. He entered the hall where Steffy waited, her gaze soft. She's okay, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Yeah, Liam responded. She's fine. And for the first time in weeks they both believed it.